Three.
Greetings all. This is Marduk's Musing with Dorje from heartastrology.com
Hey, everybody.
and myself, Meten, or Mario from Plutonic Planes. Today we're going to discuss the Jupiter square, which is occurring on August 19th. It also will be conjuncting Mars on August 15th. And this is a part of a larger narrative that began with the 2020 conjunction in tropical Aquarius at 0 degrees between Jupiter and Saturn. So this is usually every 20 years, there's a cycle that begins with the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And usually one planet will lead. And right now we're in the particular, and every 4 years there's an aspect. So this is how the narrative flows forth. So we're in the chapter of the square. And so the square is like, whereas the conjunction is like the new moon, the square is kind of like the first, what is it called? I forgot. But the first part where we're re-examining our goals, and we're looking at what's working and what's not, and how we want to push forth. And so this tension is also expressing itself in multi-layered ways with the signs that Jupiter and Saturn are in, and where that is at in our charts. But overall, in general, we're all going through this tension of too much or too little, or just how to like find a middle ground and balance these energies, because Jupiter's always wants to expand beyond. And Saturn is really good at helping us organize and really get down to what's necessary, what we can get done step by step to accomplish in the future, and kind of roll with the challenges, because there's a lot of limitations. Saturn's really strong. It's conjuncting Nessus. It's really going to be strong on limitations and kind of wanting to, like, there'll be doors opening, but it will be shutting doors as well and creating difficult periods. So I'll let you jump in, Dorje, and add to that, because I just wanted to nuance a little background, but share with us.
Yeah, that's great. So then I like the idea that you're bringing forth of like, well, with the Saturn square, what we're really talking about is, we have an idea that's born during the conjunction. And then now, I'm gonna throw up the chart actually. Now we have the Jupiter and Saturn square. So there's this tension between what we idealize or what we idealize and what we hope for, and versus the actual practicality of what we're building right now. And so that's seen, that's visible by this square energy. And I like that you brought that up. So in that context of the three squares that we have, because we're going to have a square now, and then we're going to have a square in December, and then a square in the following May. That is the periods of the building blocks of where this square is going, what it's putting together. The initial emphasis, or what we're initially going towards, that can be found in the Saturn conjunction occurred here, December 21st, 2020. And so, like, one thing to note about this conjunction is that whatever house this falls in your chart, that's where you're rebuilding a new structure for the next 20 years. It's a complete paradigm shift from what you have been doing before. And there could be, a lot of struggle within that. Like, for example, like, my chart, that's the second house. That's your finances. That's how you approach finances. That's like what you're doing to create finances. What chart was that in for you, Mario?
It's in my 10th. So
10th. Well, haha.
Yeah. Putting myself out there for my new kind of, well, been doing this a long time, but pushing forth in a new way for a new transformation in that area of how I present myself to the stage of the world, right? And Dorje mentioned challenge, especially in the sense that right now all of that, this thematic is being tested because Pluto's in 0 degrees Aquarius. And that's what Dorje is talking about when he says the next 20 odd, yeah, 20 years with Pluto and Aquarius.
Right, and then the entire Saturn Jupiter conjunction cycle, because those occur every 20 years, the Saturn Jupiter conjunctions,
Yeah, yeah.
off and on, Yeah. So it's interesting how that's all lining up. And I would encourage anybody listening to this, go to your chart right now and pull up and look at what house Aquarius is. Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about rebuilding those structures from new, innovative ideas and then moving them forward. When you look at the Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius conjunction that occurred in December 21st, 2020, Mark, what's your sense? What do you see there about what the implications are of that for the world in general?
A couple of things I see is the sun is with its emissary. So sun is with Mercury, almost exact. It's 1 degree off. And that's in Capricorn. So the sun was still shining its light through a Saturnian reality, through kind of, we could say Saturn is the spirit in some sense, if we look at the glyph. And then with its emissary there, Mercury, the focus is still on the way things were. And then we have Jupiter coming together in Aquarius for a new vision. And it's in tropical, we're looking at tropical whole sign. This was in Aquarius. So with it being in Aquarius, we have both Jupiter representing kind of our desires, where we want to expand our reality, what experience we want to have in it. And now we have Mars in the mix, which, gives us access and energy to make it reality. And Saturn is Saturn's our, it's our material reality. It's the mental world. It's the physical world. And so with Saturn there in Aquarius, it's going to solidify those visions. And there's going to be this tension that continues through this cycle. What images of Jupiter and Mars of their work is going to be solidified. Saturn will decide that. Now, I think what we're looking at here, Dorje, and both of us could speak to this, is who has the upper hand here, Saturn or Jupiter? Who's going to have the final say on what really gets pushed into material reality, or what we experience on this kind of layer, this density layer? That's a whole nother avenue. Let's explore it. Dorje, what do you think?
Yeah, that's great. With the Saturn in Pisces retrograde right now, it's what's called in a superior position to Jupiter, because it's going to strike that midheaven first as the zodiac goes around in a 24-hour cycle every day. Then Saturn's ascending to the midheaven first. So that's what's called the superior position. It has its say in the world first, and then Jupiter will follow it. And right now, for this particular square that's coming up next week, what we see Saturn in Pisces retrograde, and that's a sense of groundlessness. Like the structures that you're looking for aren't quite there. They're not quite functional yet. So you're still figuring out how to put things together per se. And then Jupiter is just like these overwhelming, energetic ideas about how to make it all come together. But the foundation is not quite there. The enthusiasm's there, the excitement's there, but the foundation is just not quite there. While we're at the square, we have Venus in Virgo opposite that Saturn. So there's like this kind of like tension between what the enjoyment that people are seeking and the practical reality of what they have to do to make that enjoyment happen. And then Mars and Jupiter are conjunct, and that's what I mean by that overwhelming energetic enthusiasm. There's a lot of enthusiasm in the air. I don't know about you, Mario, but I'm like going around, I'm talking to people, I'm giving readings, and I am talking to friends and family, and people are wound up right now. And I think that's that Mars conjunct Jupiter. There is a lot of energy going on, and it's mental and verbal energy. And that's a big part of what the square is currently, and it's also a square that's dealing with polarities and extremes. And I think we can see that in the political theater. I think we can see that in the entertainment theater there, because both of those are this entire square complex, T-square complex is in mutable signs.
Mhm.
So it's examining extremes of thought, extremes of polarities. That's my initial take. What do you see?
I'm gonna stand on your shoulders there. I mean, brilliant elucidation of what's going on in terms of the detail and the microcosm. I'm gonna bring that out a little for the next the completion of this square cycle next June, where we see Dorje pointed out that this Saturn and Saturn is having that tension with Venus and Virgo. That tension is really going to be set off once we move in September into the eclipse cycle of Pisces and Virgo. So what we sense as practical reality is going to be shifting, and it's going to be a lot of changes for Virgo and Pisces energy. So this is setting the stage for a world that's completely different come next summer at the end of this cycle. And not completely different, of course. I mean, there's things cooking, that I've been for a while, like Mars and, a lot of outer planets moving into Aries, or a couple of them. And so that's what I'm seeing. And then even expanding out even further, the ultimate tension between rulership of this Aquarian Pluto, in the sense that we have two rulers, right? We have Saturn as the traditional ruler of Aquarius, and then we have the more modern ruler of Aquarius as Uranus. So that's an additional tension between what direction this Pluto in Aquarius, how it's going to rebuild, destroy and recreate, manifest this kind of new frequency of reality we're going to be experiencing in the next 20 years. And so that's a larger take on it, but to come back into it, but yeah, I'll let you reflect back on that, because that's loaded. That's, this is really a loaded presentation of these tensions, and another chapter starting next summer as we're kind of experiencing it, what worked and what didn't as far as our goals, because the completion of that cycle will be the culmination of our goals right now. What's working, what's not. I'm going to go through with this. I'm not going to go through with that. And then June again to see how it went, or how it's going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really interesting to me that in the cycle of this square between Jupiter and Saturn that we're going to be living through between now and next June, that you start with Pluto at the point of the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. So you start with this kind of like groundbreaking, like deep urge for change and transformation, symbolized by Pluto and Aquarius, because Aquarius is the conservative principle of transformation. I say conservative because there is that Saturn rulership there. Like, I don't know how many Aquarian friends that you have. I mean, hopefully there's a ton of Aquarians who are going to be listening to this, and I don't want to offend them. But every Aquarian I know, they are radical revolutionaries, but they are incredibly moralistic and conservative at the exact same time. It's an interesting dichotomy that sign embodies. And so you got Pluto, which is these just deep urges to change and transform things, struggling against a kind of conservative nature of like, but we don't want to make a mess, right? That's the Aquarians. They don't like making messes. They're not messy people. Aquarians are more Virgo than Virgos, if you really think about it. Like, you walk into a Virgo's room, there's a 50% chance there's like stacks of paper everywhere. You walk into an Aquarius room, they know where everything is and it is filed correctly. It's a really interesting thing. But then that Pluto for the next square is going to be retrograded back into Capricorn, disrupting the structures. And then for the final square, it's back in Aquarius. So it's talking about how we review what the practical structures are that are needed to make the transformations that this square is calling for.
Yeah, very well said. I want to add to that that Saturn right now is conjunct Nessus. Now, this is not a very nice representation of Saturn's energies. As Dorje was noting and myself, we're dealing with tensions between let's do this, let's do that. Oh, this sounds amazing. We're looking at expansion, but it looks like Saturn's going to be shutting down and not very nicely certain doors that we think we can walk through. So there'll be moments where we feel like we can take a chance on this, or why don't I take this big risk over here and make that opportunity work? But there'll be times when Saturn will shut it down. And Nessus is not a very nice asteroid. It's known as a very abusive asteroid, either towards oneself or towards others. And it's a very yeah, it's a very scathing kind of energy. And so Saturn here, along with being in Pisces, when Saturn's in Pisces, Saturn turns off the water, it turns off the Plato of Neptune. How we create comes under question in such a way that it turns into reality really quickly. And we may find out too quick that it's not a game we want to play. This particular goal might not be the correct game. Does that make sense? It's just
Hey, yeah, could you say a little bit about the myth of Nessus? I mean, I know it's like a Greek myth, but I'm not so familiar. Is he a centaur, or what's the story of Nessus?
so Nessus was a centaur, and he
Mm.
was entrusted to ferry Hercules' wife, Deianira, across.
She was a hottie, right?
Well, she was the wife of Hercules.
Yeah.
For some reason, she had to be ferried across, and Hercules was nearby for some reason. And so Nessus attempted to, according to the myth, to rape her, and
Mm,
Hercules saw this happening and shot a poison arrow at him and
mm,
killed him. But as
mm.
he was dying, he was able to convince Deianira to take some of her blood as a poison to give to Hercules if he continued to be unfaithful to her.
Man, that's a toxic relationship if I've ever heard of one.
And under, and under that advice or suggestion, I guess it happened, and she did give the poison to Hercules,
Unbelievable.
and he died. And so the major themes of Nessus surround violence, revenge, abuse, betrayal, mistrust, guilt, as well as death.
Okay, that's fascinating. And one reason that's fascinating to me is because I believe Nessus is at 19 degrees Pisces, and
Mhm.
Saturn didn't quite make it there, right? And it just kind of like mind blowing. We are here at the exact moment of this square, and there was a terrorist attack that was going to be targeted towards Taylor Swift's concerts in Venice using chemical and poisonous gas that was just broken up. And so there's and this just hit the news yesterday. So it's like the manifestation of that, because that Saturn didn't quite bring that poisonous quality of Nessus into the world, but it was almost did. It was like this close, you know. Yeah, fascinating. I love how astrology is like always resonates with the myths of what's actually happening in the world in real time.
Yeah,
It's one of the more amazing things about astrology.
there was no other close asteroids that I saw in
Hmm,
this T-square and this tension that we're going to be
hmm,
having with this full moon, but
hmm,
Nessus did stand out
hmm,
as the closest.
hmm.
And yeah, that's a
Well,
trick.
I mean, that makes me think, like, because Jupiter and Mars are in Gemini, and then it's square in Nessus and Saturn, we might see stories over the next 7 or 9 months in the news about like toxic gas, chemical weapons, or I wouldn't be surprised to see some kind of like chemical gas leak in the news in a major way based on the myth that you're telling somewhere in the world over the next 9 months.
Well, let's even step back for a more bird's eye view. We're moving into Pluto and Aquarius, right? So
Mm-hmm,
Aquarius is
mm-hmm,
air and Pluto is
mm-hmm,
death. Pluto is
mm,
transformation. And so Pluto, it rules poison, it rules
mm,
extremes, it
mm-hmm,
rules
mm-hmm,
deep, deep riches in the earth,
mm-hmm,
as
mm-hmm,
well as poisons and gases that can come from the core, or from some part of the earth. And then we think
mm-hmm,
about volcanoes and we think about,
mm-hmm,
earthquakes. What do those release? They release what's within the earth,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and they release it into
Yeah,
the
yeah.
air. So, so this kind of amorphous, Neptunian concepts of things being like mist driven and into our air is right there with Aquarius and Pluto as
Mm-hmm.
well as Nessus. So these themes
Yeah,
come from all directions.
yeah. No, it reminds me of these, like I don't know if you ever go on Twitter or X. I spent some time there. If anybody wants to follow Dorje on Twitter. But like Twitter used to be like, a place where you go and talk to people. Now it's like the dark web, and you go on there and like there's all these like you'll see these images of these drones in Ukraine hunting Russians or hunting Ukrainians, depending on like who's posting it. And they go and they come down from the air and then they hunt them and then they kill them. I mean, yeah, Twitter's it's kind of gross. It's
That's
like the dark web
horrible.
used to be like all snuff films, and now Twitter's where you go to see that, and it's kind of hard to block them. They throw so many of them up there, but that's what you're talking about, that death from the air as a principle, part of what the Pluto in Aquarius is exemplifying.
And so,
And I
go ahead, go ahead.
No, and I think that's also something that we're going to see over the time of the square cycle is humanity kind of grappling with this, especially when the square ends. Then, especially when the square ends, it's going to end with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And that is like there's a lot of astrologers who are worried about that being when we really kind of like hit peak war, because there's some hot spots on the world right now, and it's sad, it's tragic. I mean, most of us are just kind of like living in our little, houses and like looking at our phones and texting each other, but there's some really hot spots in the world, and I'm a little bit worried with that final square there, that part of that is this kind of like eruption into the reality of everything's not okay, and maybe the burning down of some structures before we can move into what I hope is promised by that Jupiter in Cancer, which is a more nurturing, more caring society. A society that's more concerned with the benefit of the earth and the nurturing principle of the earth and the nurturing principle of what humanity needs in order to, thrive, versus this kind of like what we've been going through for a long time now, especially since the Pluto Uranus square, and Pluto entering Aquarius is this kind of like restructuring of everything, meat grinder, that I know I'm not the only one who's been feeling.
Yeah, with Uranus there in Taurus and Earth still holding down to the Earth. Let me speak to a couple of things. I mean, social media is all air. It's all words. You're speaking about
Mm-hmm,
images, of course. Images and videos are showing up as well. But these are
mm-hmm,
all air principles. The Western world is just has been obsessed with air, with the mind, with thoughts, with words for so long. It's always
mm-hmm,
been ungrounded ever since the native populations were killed and destroyed. And we were
mm-hmm,
lifted into air, ungrounded. And
mm-hmm,
the natives, like they were all about grounding into the earth and utilizing the energies of the earth. We've shut it
mm-hmm,
down. The Western world has
mm-hmm,
shut that down. So that
mm-hmm,
is the purification of process of the earth will, as you said, as you noted, there are pockets of the world right now that are suffering extremely.
mm-hmm,
When the
mm-hmm,
earth jumps into this into this mix to purify, we have Uranus again in Taurus still. and completing its mission right there close to the aneretic degree, causing more and more pockets to open up and more earthquakes and
mm,
seeming earth disasters, which are just really purifications, just really the process that needs to happen and take forth. And it sadly it will bring up a lot of, just like the war will attempt to do, it will bring a lot of change to this world. And then speaking to the war possibilities amping up, I mean, to me, when I look at that Saturn square Jupiter here in June of next year, and I see Neptune moving into Aries along with Saturn, both of them together, I just see it continuously just the shutdown of the water element, in the sense that there will be more countries coming into this war, and it'll be expanding. So like you said, like it's going to reach a peak, and those outer planets are just getting into Aries, so it'll continue for a little while, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, that Neptune will be in Aries for a long time. And to be fair, like in my mind, Neptune gets a bad rap. It's illusion, it's obfuscation. Neptune is also meditation and a mind that is relaxed. And I think part of why Neptune gets a bad rap is it is this like ultra hippie relaxed mind quality too. It's like go with the flow. Neptune, like associated ruler of Pisces, go with the flow. So ideally, in my mind, what happens is like over the next 9 months, we get this like, just really, like I said, polarity experience. And then this final square comes along. And rather than moving into a new cycle of war, it's almost like a relaxation occurs. Like, okay, everybody, let's let go of the aggression. You know, that's what I would like to see. Because astrology, it's always like it speaks in extremes, but it's usually somewhere in between of what's actually happening. And so I would like to think that we move out of the extremes that we've been experiencing with the mutable signs and into a more initiatory movement into like, okay, this is what we're doing. We can relax into it now. It's all going to start working as that Saturn Jupiter cycle moves further into its eventual expression of the opposition between the two, where Jupiter then starts taking over, like, oh, we've reached our peak potential of the age of air, the 20-year cycle of air, halfway through Pluto moving through Aquarius. And then we reorient and we start working towards what is the next cycle going to be. But that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see that Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries being like Saturn restricting war and Neptune relaxing us out of the aggressive state that Aries usually is. Hopefully I'm not dreaming.
No, I like that. That's great.
Or
It's
living
calming
in fantasy, so to speak,
Yeah.
Yes.
We're hoping both that Neptune waters the fires of Aries, and Saturn kind of keeps it under control.
Yeah.
I like the vision. I mean, Jupiter and Cancer, that's really lovely. That's bringing it back home. That's creating that contrast of, no, we don't want these wars. We as humanity don't want that. We want to renew our home. We want to
Yeah.
expand where we really want to live and center and ground ourselves.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Earthen way, not this like lost way of like, I mean, the wars have nothing to do with humanity at large. These are being directed by, other agendas, This is just as usual fodder, we're being made fun out of. But with the earth changes too, we're definitely gonna be vulnerable to that as well.
Yeah, and that might really crank up after this final square. even more so than it has been, and it's been noticeable. Yeah, I get that. Thank you, Mario.
Yeah, thanks, Dorje. We'll call it here. Thanks so much for watching. You guys can check out Dorje at heartastrology.com and get a reading. I myself am on YouTube, Plutonic Planes, and will not have my website come out till later, as Dorje wisely advised me last time in our Mercury retrograde podcast. I won't even work on it until September. But
yeah, it's a terrible month for elections and putting new things out. Terrible.
yeah. All right,
Yeah.
thanks so much.
But
Oh,
yeah, you're welcome. And I just like to tell, everybody, as I said last time, like Mario's actually a very rare blend of a master of human design and traditional astrology. So if you get a chance, reach out to him. He has a Reddit community. Reach out to him and ask if you can be part of it if you're interested
Discord.
in working with him. Discord community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Awesome.
that.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Mario. Take care.
Thanks. Okay.